The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com. All right, welcome back to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky. We just talked about the Cubs and Jake Arrieta, and if he's declining or not, him suffering his first loss. And now I'm going to talk about the other side of town, the White Sox. They got off to an incredible start, also starting out 23-10. And at one point, the Cubs and the White Sox had the two best records in Major League Baseball. And then the White Sox lost 15 of their next 19 games.
I know. What the heck happened?
And then they, looked like, okay, they got back on track, had a couple nice wins over the Mets when Matt Albers hit that huge extra inning double.
That was really funny, too.
Forgot how to slide.
He's like, oh, I forgot how to slide. Oops.
And people say the NL should get the DH. That right there is why they don't.
That's the only reason why, right?
Yeah, no. And then, they won 2 in a row, and then they're going into Comerica Park, and they've got Chris Sale and Jose Quintana lined up to pitch in that series.
Right.
And they get swept. Yeah,
I mean, it's unacceptable that you didn't win at least the game that Sale pitched, because at least when Quintana pitches, we know that the offense, it doesn't do anything when Quintana pitches. But you would think with Chris Sale pitching, you would have won that game. Detroit's not that good. I mean, they have a pretty good offense. They don't really have any pitching at all. So
outside of Zimmerman and Verlander, it's kind of sketchy.
Yeah, and so overall, you would probably take the White Sox staff over the Tigers staff just for that fact that, the Sox 3-4-5, especially now with getting James Shields, is much better than the Tigers 3-4-5.
Right, and now that long skid has the White Sox looking at a 29-28 record. They're only one game above 500, and they're 3 games out of first place.
Are they still in third?
They are in third place. They're a half a game ahead of the Tigers.
Yeah, so, the Tigers are creeping up there, and we know the Twins aren't going anywhere. So, I mean, again, the AL Central is tight and competitive with those top 4 teams in it.
Each one of those teams can win it. At this point, even with the trade for James Shields, we'll get into that in a little bit. I think it's going to either be the Indians or the Royals, and it most likely will be the Royals. They finally found some offense.
Yeah, I think the Tigers are a couple years away from going back to the postseason if they are. I think they kind of get. I think the Tigers kind of have to leave the Miguel Cabrera era first for them to get back to the playoffs. They need to start to get a couple younger guys and everything.
They need more young players, yes.
Yeah.
And
overall,
you can't keep handing out these big contracts. Verlander's on a huge contract. Miguel Cabrera is going to be with them for another 8 years.
I don't know how that's going to work out. He's going to be bad for 5 of those years.
Yeah, well, when Dave Dombrowski handed out the extension, he just said that he didn't want to lose Miggy, and that was so understandable at the time. And they were the first team ever to hand out $200 million contracts in the offseason to free agents, to Jordan Zimmerman and Justin Upton. And while Jordan Zimmerman has been very good, he's got a 2.51 ERA. Justin Upton has really just been struggling. He's struggling to hit 220. Hasn't really found his power stroke.
Yeah, he's on and off always. I mean, I think if you look at him for most of his career,
he's been one of the more streaky guys.
Yeah, he's very streaky. It even goes by years too. I mean, he was good. He was pretty good with Arizona. He goes to Atlanta, not so much. Then he's with Detroit, not so much. He was with San Diego too, right?
He had a pretty solid year with San Diego last year. He hit 28 home runs.
Yeah, so I mean, you can't really rely on those players so much when they're so on and off. But yeah, the AL Central as a whole is still very competitive. Every year it seems to be like this, and then the Sox and Indians usually fall off a little bit. And the last few years it's been competitive between the Royals and Tigers, but the Royals have always won. They ran away with the division last year, so it's just it's very interesting. And the Royals have had lots of injuries. Mike Moustakas out for the year, and their starting pitching has certainly been struggling. Of course, they did have that unbelievable comeback against the White Sox in Kansas City. I think that was Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago now.
Yeah, every game in that series is. I mean, the White Sox bullpen just imploded that series.
But that was a historic collapse. I think it had only happened in that situation 4 other times in Major League history.
I think the Royals were the 6th team to do it.
Yeah, so
come
maybe
back
it
from
happened
down 6 runs in the 9th.
It's just the way it happened. I mean, it should have never happened. I don't know what David Robertson's problem is. He was horrible that game. He hasn't been very good all season. That's sort of looking like a backfired move that they made 2 off seasons ago now, acquiring David Robertson. He didn't get a chance in 2015 to do anything because they were bad, and now when they're trying to be competitive, he hasn't really stepped up.
Yeah, that was just an interesting sequence of managing by Robin Ventura. I know he's been scrutinized for his handling of the bullpen.
Yeah.
That was kind of odd that he left Robertson as long as he did when it was clear he didn't have it. And then when he took Robertson out, he put in Conley, who had literally just been called up.
Right, he's been called up and down a few times.
Yeah, I don't know why you would put him in with the game on the line when you have guys like Nate Jones in the bullpen who you could have had come in and close out. And then what happened when Nate Jones and then what happened the next day? They brought in Nate Jones, and he gave up 4 runs, and they lost on Sunday.
Yeah, it's very frightening what this bullpen has become. A few years ago, the bullpen was their strong suit, a lot of people said. But now a lot of those guys haven't done anything this year, really. They haven't really had a good bullpen. Their best bullpen pitcher might be Matt Albers, and he hasn't.
He hasn't been nearly as good as he was last year. His ERA is, I think, around 4.54.
That's sort of the case with all the White Sox bullpen guys. They're not doing their part. They're not helping out the starters who are really, doing well. I mean, Matt Latos is starting to lose it, but that's sort of expected.
That was expected with Matt Latos to have that regression.
The problem is Quintana pitched bad in Detroit, but he still has pitched very well this year, and Chris Sale's pitched very well this year, except for a few games.
And now Miguel Gonzalez has been moved to the bullpen. They traded for James Shields. They didn't really give up much to get him. They gave up Eric Johnson, who they'd been calling up and down the past couple of years. Every time he'd pitch, he'd proved he didn't have it.
Yeah.
So they didn't really give up much. They get Fernando Tatis Jr., 17-year-old shortstop who they signed in the international draft last year. Not a big deal. They're paying about half of the Shields' salary. The issue that I have, people are saying the Sox got, a lot of fans are saying they got a great deal. Yeah, well, they got a great deal for Shields, except I don't think he's a good fit. He's a fly ball pitcher in a ballpark that he will be giving up a lot of home runs in.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. He pitched well with Kansas City when he was there. He did not pitch well with San Diego very much. He was okay early, but he was really bad later on in the season, and he hasn't been that good this year. So I think the problem I have with it is, I know Eric Johnson, he didn't do much, and I guess it's fine that they gave him up. But, the Sox should be trying to keep their prospects at this point. I mean, they've got a great prospect, Tim Anderson. I'm afraid what happens if the Sox start competing and, they go on a hot streak right now and, towards the trade deadline, they trade Tim Anderson from, some left-handed bat and then don't make the playoffs. I mean,
then that left-handed bat will turn into the LaRoche they thought they got rid of when he retired.
Yeah, like if they go out and get Jay Bruce. I know the 2 names that keep circulating are Jay Bruce and Carlos Gonzalez. Well, Carlos Gonzalez, he gets hurt every year, and Jay Bruce is not very good in my opinion.
He's been very good this year. He's hitting 280. He's hitting home runs. I think that Jay Bruce would be a great fit for the White Sox.
I feel
especially in their ballpark.
I agree that he would hit some home runs there, no question. I just think he's too unreliable. I mean, we've seen what he is. He was horrible last year. He got off. I think he started to do good late in 2015. I had him on my fantasy team last year, and I dropped him early. But I don't know. I just feel like if you change the scenery for him, because Cincinnati's a good hitting park too, but if you change the scenery, and I just feel like it would backfire for the White Sox. And who would you have to trade from your farm system to get him? I mean, Is Tim Anderson gone then? Like your best prospect, Carson Fulmer? Are they going to get rid of him? Like
I'd say it's more likely they trade someone on the more along the side of Spencer Adams, because the thing with Bruce is he's got a club option for next season, so he's not just a couple-month rental. He's a guy you could have for another season.
Yeah, I don't like that they refuse to rebuild. And I mean,
well, that's just what the Bulls are doing. The Reinsdorf-owned teams, they're not trying to rebuild. They're not trying to find good coaching.
Well,
they're not
exactly
trying to find competent guys in the front office. This is what happens. Now, I mean, this is really what happens. You're just stuck in
because they're afraid they're going to lose their 20,000 fans that show up every game.
You're stuck in the mediocrity to bad phase where you're winning 75 to 80 games a year. And then when you make a couple off-season moves and you think that that's all you need to do. And I mean, even when the White Sox are 23-10, they had glaring holes at shortstop, in the outfield, catcher. I mean, that's something. The platoon they've got is something they can get away with if they if they get an outfielder and if they get another starting pitcher and maybe a reliever.
Yeah, I mean, Austin Jackson is your starting center fielder. I mean, that's not a playoff team. It's not a playoff team when Austin Jackson is your starting center fielder. He's great defensively. He can't hit. He hasn't hit since 2010 in Detroit. I mean, he hasn't.
And even then, he
hasn't done anything.
He was never the kind of guy that was actually a great hitter. Like he would maybe hit 260 with 10 home runs, 270.
He always had great potential, and a lot of people always said, "Oh, he's going to come out of it. He's going to be great. He's going to be one of the best outfielders in baseball," and it never happened.
He plays good defense. He's fast. He was just one of those guys that you were expecting to put it together and then never did, and that's kind of what looks like might happen with Avisail Garcia.
Yeah, obvious. That's another player that really needs to start to figure it out because they put a lot of faith in him, and he hasn't done much.
And the offense would look a lot better. They'd probably be scoring more runs if Jose Abreu wasn't hitting 245.
Right.
So, I mean, they have a lot of problems. They do have a lot of areas to address, except that they're serious about competing. They probably won't trade for another starter because they got Rodon and Latos filling out the back two spots.
Right.
I don't think they'll get another starter. I do think, though, that getting a Jay Bruce type player is a priority for them, and maybe another bullpen.
I think it would be important, but again, I'm just worried about what they're going
to give up.
Yeah.
See, who are
they going to trade for him?
I mean, they're going to need to find a way to not trade Tim Anderson or Carson Fulmer. Those are two guys that they.
And I'm afraid that Kenny Williams, he doesn't care. He's like, I don't care if I get rid of Carson Fulmer. I mean, is it?
The thing with Fulmer,
I mean, we know it's Rick Hahn's decision, but
might be Kenny's too. That the thing with Fulmer is he's the kind of guy that they could call up later in the season and try to throw him in the bullpen and see what he can do. That could be maybe their acquisition for a reliever. I mean, Jay Bruce is a great fit for them. That ballpark is small. He's hitting very good. He can play. He can just throw him in the outfield, and obviously, Austin Jackson would be better suited for being in a backup role or maybe a platoon. Maybe you could even try to platoon him some of the time with Bruce or even Adam Eaton.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. It's just I feel like if the White Sox would come out and say, we're going to go through a rebuild, sort of like what the Cubs did. But see, their issue is they're afraid that fans won't show up, like even less fans will show up.
Even though fans don't show up in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think the realistic White Sox fan thinks, look at what the Cubs did in our same city. They went through the rebuild. They're good now. They're going to be good for, approximately 5-6 years, maybe more. And then now, I feel like the White Sox fans understand, if they go through a rebuild, and it doesn't even have to be as long as the Cubs one was because they already have some pieces. The Cubs had nothing when they went through.
All they had was Castro and Samardzija.
Right. So the White Sox still have good they still have some good pieces. Starting pitching's not really an issue. So the problem is, I feel like they don't think any fans will show up. Then, I just think White Sox fans would understand. I think the average White Sox fan would understand. Let's go through a rebuild for a couple years, and let's be good, for a long time.
Right, except now they're not in a position that they can do that because they have some pieces that can compete, except they don't have enough in the farm system to go out and potentially acquire what they need to without giving up guys like Tim Anderson or Carson Fulmer. So it's going to be interesting because, as you said, if they had just kind of went into a full rebuild like the Cubs, they could have even been in a better spot than the Cubs because, as you said, they had Jose Abreu, Jose Quintana, and Chris Sale, where the Cubs really didn't have much. They had Castro. Samardzija turned into